So I want to introduce the 5 R's of the GI tract. And the 5 R's are basically how do we restore our gut system and our GI tract. We're going to spend more time on these, but I want to at least just mention the 5 R's are remove, replace, reinoculate or repopulate, repair, and rebalance. Those are the 5 R's. So the first R, remove the offenders. So here is we want to remove food allergens, remove these food triggers, with an elimination diet and or possibly a personalized, MRT, looking at medicines and microbes that possibly could be of concern. And when the gut lining is permeable and food particles leak across the barrier, our immune system is going to attack these food particles. And if our immune system is involved, that's generally going to be an immunoglobulin response, since there's an IgG food allergy. Those will potentially lead to leaky gut, possibly could lead to weight gain, and other chronic health conditions can emerge. Additionally, we know that systemic inflammation represents a stronger contributor of obesity-related depressive symptoms, even more so than metabolic health. I want to share with you one other story here in terms of inflammation of the gut. And this is a patient I started working with a couple years ago, Eden. She's a rock star, not really a rock star, really an architect, but in my mind, she's a rock star. And she's somebody who came to me eating very healthfully, eating lots of vegetables, eating adequate protein, not having sugar, clean diet, exercising, clean, environment and so forth. And yet, no matter what she was doing, she was gaining weight. She had gained 100 pounds in a matter of a couple years. And we're like, okay, what can we possibly do to limit, to start to get the weight in the other direction? So for Eden, what we did is we also tried the MRT plan. And she started following the food protocol. And we have since then, we ended up testing for SIBO and managing SIBO and a variety of other, factors that have kind of come into it. But I couldn't be happier for her that she has achieved so compliant, working so hard. She has lost 100 pounds in the last 2 years since we've been working together. 100 pounds with food, no no drugs that were leading to that weight gain, to leading to that weight loss, no surgeries, just simply everything she was able to do on her own. And 100 pounds, I just absolutely astounding. So excellent work, Eden. So the second R to touch on is replace. We want to replace the missing components. Do you have adequate digestive enzymes? Do you have adequate stomach acid, betaine, hydrochloric acid, for example? Stomach acid is crucial. It helps to kill off pathogenic bacteria. It allows for proper digestion of protein. It signals other digestive organs to release juices, such as bicarbonate. It helps to also signal to produce your digestive enzymes like amylase to digest fats and protease for proteins and amylase for carbohydrates. And it also releases intrinsic factor to allow for proper B12 absorption. If we don't have intrinsic factor, no matter what you do, you will not absorb oral vitamin B12. So we want to make sure we have intrinsic factor in the stomach to then be able to get that vitamin B12 absorbed further down in the small intestine. So one thing I'm going to present to you today is what I would consider called the baking soda test. Now, this test is not the medical diagnosis of how do we determine your stomach acid. That would be the Heidelberg test. But sheltering in place, we're at home. This is a test that is free. It doesn't cost you anything. And you could actually learn a considerable amount by doing this test. So how do you do the baking soda test? The baking soda test is where you mix a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda with about 4 ounces or so of room temperature water. It doesn't have to be perfect. The idea is being that's not super cold, not super hot. You want to drink that first thing in the morning. So do this before you brush your teeth, before you have a glass of water. Do this first thing. Mix these together, drink the solution. You don't want to drink it slowly over an hour. You also don't want to, shoot it in one fellow swoop. Just drink at a normal pace. Then I want you to set a timer for 5 minutes. And I want you to note during that 5-minute period, do you burp? And if you do, when do you burp? And I don't want to bias your results, but because there are so many of you and I may not be getting emails from everyone, if you burp in those first couple minutes, that would suggest you have adequate stomach acid. You take baking soda, which is very alkaline, bicarbonate, right? We mix that with stomach acid, it should cause a reaction. That should create a burp. If, however, you don't have enough stomach acid, you may find that you can drink the baking soda solution and you don't burp at all. And that's not uncommon. So it doesn't mean something's wrong. It means that it's, we can definitely help to resolve that. And if indeed we found, wow, we do have low stomach acid, well, then we could look at, well, what do we notice if we incorporate a little bit more acid to the stomach? Do you find then that you're not bloated right after you eat? You're not having a burning sensation after you eat. You're not feeling uncomfortably full. You're not feeling particularly tired. A variety of factors that may come into play. So we could look at, what about the use of apple cider vinegar or lemon or bitters or betaine hydrochloric acid, little capsules that we use prior to meals, even ginger. And we want to make sure that ideally, if you have low stomach acid, you want to avoid water with your meals because the water will dilute everything in the system and kind of allow a little bit more of an alkaline situation. So we want to consume our fluids, we want to consume lots of fluids, but particularly we would want to do that when it's between meals rather than with your meals. And I would suggest to do this test at least 2 times, technically 2 mornings. And if you happen to get different results, go ahead and do it a 3rd time. If you get the exact same results or very similar results 2 times in a row, probably going to be sufficient to just do it those 2 times. So moving on to our 3rd R, reinoculate, repopulate. This is an area where we would talk about prebiotics, which are the fuel for the probiotics, and then also our probiotics, which are basically there to help facilitate proper digestion and absorption of our nutrients. See, there's a cue here. I can't kind of look at all of them all there. Okay. I thought I would share also one other patient story. This was a patient who, Stephanie, she was a wonderful soul. And I worked with her almost about 20 years ago. And Stephanie had metastatic pancreatic cancer. She was young. She was probably, I think, 26 years old at the time. And she came to see me, and her situation, obviously I'm not looking at curing her cancer with probiotics, with diet, or whatever it may be in a metastatic pancreatic situation, but I certainly most wholeheartedly was going to do whatever I could to help her quality of life immediately. So the first thing we actually did is we implemented the use of probiotics, and no kidding, within 24 hours, Stephanie felt tremendously better. And I'm not saying everything was perfect, but her pain, her bloating, it helped to regulate her gut motility. It was a remarkable change within simply 24 hours by taking 1 capsule of a probiotic. So that's a situation where, not that everyone needs to run out and buy probiotics. And we can talk more about that within the course. I'll have a whole class devoted to prebiotics and probiotics, but just to highlight the potential significance and kind of what we can see with the use of something like prebiotics and probiotics. Our 4th R is repair. And with repair, we want to repair the gut barrier, that intestinal membrane. And we do that with a variety of factors, but definitely with the multivitamins and minerals, for example, with glutamine, with zinc, omega-3 fatty acids, for example. These are all factors that are going to be helpful to repair our gut barrier. And this slide, courtesy of SpectraCell Labs, just helps to show that if we're thinking, oh, I'm just going to take, omega-3s, I'm just going to take glutamine for my gut, or I'm just going to take zinc. Those are all fantastic, but as you can see, the focus is manyfold. Many different vitamins and minerals and compounds are going to affect your gut health. So rather than, I know you're going to go take all of these different that are listed here on the slide, probably not. That may be a little too many, capsules to swallow, prohibitively expensive, and more importantly, likely unnecessary for you to do that. But if we wanted to measure all of these different tests, or all of these different nutrients and compounds, we certainly could do that. And then we can base suggestions on where do you stand, which nutrients are you possibly low in, and then be able to personalize our recommendations specifically based on your biochemistry, for example. So here, looking at repair, thinking along the lines of repairing, on the left, we have a healthy gut, where you can see that the healthy mucosal cell membrane, noted by the intestinal villi, the little finger-like projections, that allows the nutrients to pass through the barrier, yet the toxins are blocked. On the right, we have an injured gut, where the injured mucosa blocks the nutrients, so increasing the potential of seeing, malnutrition, and yet the toxins are able to penetrate through into the bloodstream, and that could create anything from digestive distress to cognitive fog to fatigue to a variety of other ailments. So we want to hopefully help maintain a healthy gut. And if you have an injured gut, well, that's exactly why we're here, to help repair, rehabilitate the gut, to help improve your digestive system and microbiome. Now, taking that slide even a little bit more closely, this is a little snippet, if you will, of intestinal villi, the little finger-like projections there noted on the slide. This is important because at any time we have damage to our GI tract, and again, that damage could be a round of antibiotics, an anesthesia, medication. It could be it could be gluten for a celiac patient. It could be radiation. It could be chemotherapy. It could be an immense amount of stress. Whatever the case may be, whenever our GI tract is damaged, the intestinal villi are going to get smashed down. So if we have your villi fully up and intact, and then we have a little damage, the tips of those villi are going to get smashed down a little bit, okay? And when that occurs, number one, that is going to diminish our surface area across the board. So no longer do we have a tennis court, now we're going to get a much smaller surface area. That's going to negatively affect how well you can digest, absorb, and assimilate your nutrients. But secondly, I want to point out that the lactase enzyme typically sits the tips of the intestinal villi. So if there's any kind of damage to the GI tract and those intestinal villi get smashed down just even a little bit, the lactase enzyme sitting at the tips of the villi is going to get cleaved off, and hence it will no longer be there. So then one's ability to tolerate lactose-containing products, foods, beverages, even medications that may have lactose-containing elements in them, likely will be significantly diminished. And that could be where somebody finds that they are bloated, they have a variety of other issues that come with experiencing, what that they experience when they consume lactose. So keep that in mind if digestive issues are challenging, if dairy seems to be possibly a culprit. And it could be that we can repair the gut, get those intestinal villi fully back upright, where the lactase enzyme then goes back, sits on those intestinal villi, and then one could theoretically, resume to consuming dairy or lactose as they were prior to that damage. Moving on, our fifth R of the GI tract is rebalance. We want to rebalance the GI tract with lifestyle modifications. So I want to kind of put in summary here, tips to improve our microbiome and support digestive wellness. We know we want to eat a wide variety of plants. We want to be able to consume more fiber-rich whole foods, preferably organic. This would be a variety of different types of vegetables, of fruits, nuts, seeds, legumes, whole grains. In terms of vegetables and fruits, I'd love to see triple the amount of vegetables than fruits. So if you're eating 2 fruits a day, I'd love you to have at least 6 vegetable servings a day, for example. I'd much rather see that than 9 fruits and 1 vegetable. I want to flip-flop that so we have more vegetables than we do of fruits. Although fruits are still excellent sources of antioxidants, provide us a great amount of other phytochemicals. We want to make sure we have vegetables with at least 2 of your meals, maybe all 3 of them, but definitely at least with 2 of them. And I don't mean a slice of tomato on the sandwich or the big cheeseburger. I want to have lots of vegetables. I want to see preferably at least 1 cup, if not at least 2 cups of vegetables with at least those, with those 2 meals, or maybe spreading it out even with 3 meals. Lots and lots and lots of vegetables. Those will be a foundation of really supporting a good microbiome, providing your body natural prebiotics in your system. And additionally, when you look at your plate, we want to see not a huge amount of pasta, 1 little piece of broccoli. I want to see lots of vegetables, at least 50% of your plate filled with the vegetables, then 25% of the plate likely filled with some sort of protein. And then depending on kind of where things are in terms of carbohydrates, up to 25% of your plate in regards to healthy carbohydrates. That could be possibly sweet potatoes, butternut squash, other kinds of winter squash that we're heading out of, that season. Looking even at, wild rice, which is technically a grass, or quinoa, amaranth, technically seeds, or even use of brown rice or whole oats or other factors like that. Okay. We want to make sure we're including both prebiotics and probiotic foods in our diet. So prebiotics, as I mentioned earlier, could be berries, flax, jicama, leeks, mushrooms, Jerusalem artichokes, garlic, seaweeds, more, right? There are a lot of different options, all different plant foods, okay? Probiotics, those are going to be found in your fermented vegetables, in kimchi. Kimchi actually is one of the richest sources of probiotics. I think it probably will, be the highest in probiotic concentration than anything listed there. Sauerkraut, though, also a good one. Kefir, yogurt, apple cider vinegar. When it has that Mother Nature, you kind of have the little cloudiness at the bottom. You have to shake that bottle up. That oftentimes is allowing a little bit of that probiotic action that is there from that fermentation process. Those are helpful prebiotics and probiotics in our diet that we can incorporate. We want to make sure we're limiting or avoiding processed foods, foods that are high in added sugar, artificial sweeteners. There are studies showing Splenda alters the microbiome, not in a positive way, but a negative way. Let me repeat that. Splenda alters the microbiome. So I'm not saying that I'm worried that Splenda is going to cause cancer necessarily. We don't have enough research to state that. But I do think that we see that Splenda is negatively going to affect your microbiome. And as you know now, the microbiome is paramount to your entire health background. Additionally, we want to make sure we're drinking plenty of fluids, non-alcoholic, non-caffeinated fluids. And ideally, like as I said before, I'm trying to consume most of those between meals as opposed to with our meals, okay? And additionally, next could be water, it could be herbal teas, it could be some green tea, even has a little bit of caffeine, but that's, could be okay if tolerated well. Bone broth, excellent for gut healing if you like that and tolerate that. Those could be, very important to consume. We want to make sure we have regular meals of moderate volume. And in terms of regular meals, this could vary based on your system. Some situations we need to kind of encourage where one is kind of grazing on things, throughout the day. Every hour, every 2 hours, somebody's putting in a little bit of calories in their system. That is oftentimes needed if somebody's really struggling with appetite and struggling to get in adequate amount of nutrition. On the flip side, if that's not your challenge, you may find that having only meals and not having any snacks, that actually can improve peristalsis and improve something called the migrator motor complex, MMC. And the migrator motor complex, if we only eat meals that are spaced out several hours apart, then the migrator motor complex is then has to work harder, and then that will naturally work more on its own. If we constantly graze throughout the day, the migrator motor complex doesn't really have to work very hard. It can get quite lazy, and that can affect peristalsis. That can be an issue, particularly for things like SIBO. And constipation. So things we can kind of keep in mind there. Again, we want to make sure we take time to chew, to relax, and enjoy your meal. So again, chew your food up, very well. Also, in addition, we want to make sure we're limiting or avoiding foods that we know we're sensitive, intolerant, allergic, and or that are causing digestive distress. Sometimes somebody will say, well, I know I'm not really supposed to eat gluten, but I just get a little bit bloated and then I kind of move on. So, or I have strawberries and they kind of makes my mouth tingle, or get a rash, but then I'm okay. If a food or any kind of compound is providing some sort of response and reaction like that, that's telling you that it's a source of inflammation. That's creating inflammation, not just probably on your mouth, not just in your gut, but likely systemically all over your system. So if you know that that's really the case, certainly it would be most prudent for your health to not have that, or to figure out why do you have that, maybe heal up the gut more so that you're not as sensitive to certain foods as you may have been, previously. We want to minimize the use of antibiotics and antacids. Again, not using them altogether, but just making sure that we're not overusing them. Exercise, absolutely pivotal for a variety of different factors. And what type of exercise may be dictated, one, by our genomic background. I find that intriguing when I'm looking through genomics for individuals, some people being more and naturally aligned doing endurance and others doing more weight exercises, but also you think about even stress. So when I'm measuring somebody's cortisol values, for example, I had a patient last week where her cortisol values were flatlined. There was no curve. There was not even close to being normal levels of anything on her system. She was a completely flatlined, completely depleted. In her case, if we said, okay, Amy, we got to really boost your system. Let's have you do some high intensity interval training. Let's kind of really move that. Well, she's depleted. I think she would just crash. And if she could motivate herself to do it for that hour or that 30 minutes, she probably would then have to have a 4-hour nap afterwards. So we have to make sure that it's appropriate. In her case, I want to make sure we're kind of being gentle to kind of build up her system. At the same time, you may have somebody who has a really high value of cortisol. And if we take high intensity interval training, for example, just as an example, but, and somebody has really high cortisol, that may end up further exacerbating that high cortisol. So we may need to be using gentle things for those situations. So it really can be dictated in terms of really where is your system? What's really the best for you? It may even depend on what time of the day would that have some sort of an impact. Additionally, managing stress. I think we talked quite a bit about stress, kind of leading in to this area. This is definitely something, I oftentimes will be using the Dutch test, nothing really fun with the Netherlands, but the dried urine test for comprehensive hormones, for example. This test helps us to really assess where is our stress chemistry? How do we best support your system? Because if you have cortisol values that are flat, cortisol values that are elevated, cortisol values that start flat but then go elevated, or vice versa, all of those factors are going to affect how do we best treat, how do we best support one system. And then lastly there, take action to reduce the use of glyphosate on crops and in the environment. Glyphosate, as you may know, is the infamous ingredient in the herbicide Roundup, and it's been shown to destroy healthy bacteria and allow the increased growth of harmful bacteria. And even more so, it seems to be intricately connected with cancers. So we definitely want to do what we can to hopefully not have glyphosate be in our system. And there's even ways we can measure glyphosate in our system. Generally, the more plant foods we have, the more organic foods you have, generally lesser likelihood that you have higher amounts of glyphosate. All right. So I just want to also mention here, so join me next week. Would love it, love it, love it, love it. If you would, for this course, it's a 4-week course, as I mentioned. You can sign up at the website, www.natalieledesma.com. We're going to talk about all different aspects of gut health, and I'm going to open up to Q&A in just a moment. But absolutely, I think part of this piece is not only in terms of, does it make me excited that you join me, but it tells me that you care, you want your gut to be better, and you know how integral that your gut is with so many aspects of your health. And unfortunately, or fortunately, either way we look at it, we're going to be home for another month here in California, and depending on where you're located, we may be doing quite a bit of sheltering in place, across our globe. So I would love to have you join with that. I do want to take some questions. I see some in the webinar chat. I also see some Q&A that I will turn to. I just also, in case anyone needs to leave sooner, I want to really sincerely thank you for joining today. I hope you found this information helpful. Also, for those of you that are first responders, I know we have quite a few nurses, physicians that are on the call. A sincere thank you for doing what you do, for your dedication, for your fearlessness and your huge heart in helping others. So thank you so much for doing all that you're doing. Okay, I'm going to then just see quickly what we've got here in terms of some Q&As. One question was about monk fruit. Monk fruit, I like it as a possible sweetener. Similar in terms of stevia, those aren't going to really affect the glycemic index much. The challenge that I find with monk fruit is so often it's combined with a sugar alcohol. If it's just straight monk fruit, I don't have a problem with using monk fruit unless someone has a sensitivity to it. For example, I've used a bar that uses monk fruit. It's the Julian Bakery Pagan Thin Bar, I think, that uses a little bit of monk fruit, so very, very few carbohydrates and sugars in those bars. But generally, when I go to find monk fruit, then I tend to see that it oftentimes has erythritol or some other sugar alcohol in it, which not that you could never ever use, but I'm not going to be a huge fan of. A question came in terms of how do you measure glyphosate in our systems? There are a couple different labs that do measure glyphosate. I've used, what is it, Great Plains, that they do measure that. It's a, I'm trying to remember, I think it's a saliva sample, if I'm remembering correctly, or is it urine? I think it's saliva. And there's also another test that's called, I feel like it's like HRI, Health Research Labs. And Carrie, if you really want to do that, let me know. They sent me just a coupon on doing it. It was like $79, so it's not overly expensive to measure that. And we could definitely figure out a way to do that, and that could be, you know, an option. What else do we have here? Just making sure I'm not missing any questions. What if patients are not willing to adjust their diet drastically? How can we counsel a patient with that mindset? So I know some of you are patients. You would never even think about not being willing, right? Because you're motivated, you're really invested. So kudos to you for being so invested in your health. For those that are a little less so, then I would consider, where do we start? You just pick one area and you just kind of focus on that one factor. So it may be that if we're really not going to change diet, then I may say, okay, and if they had digestive issues, do we have SIBO? Do we have, inflammation in the system? Can we do, would they be open to do a couple supplements or, other factors that we could potentially test? What about, is it just simply stomach acid? What if we just add a little bit of acid to every meal that they have? Does that help to take their symptoms down considerably? Lots of different options that we could possibly, see. There, let me just pull up here. With regards to having low stomach acid, acid reflux, taking omeprazole, what do we do? And this is an area that if you have low stomach acid, then surprisingly, sometimes having a little bit of acid actually helps, although it may seem like it's counterintuitive if you're having acid reflux. So it may be a very kind of fine tuning where you may use just a tiny amount of apple cider vinegar, for example, just because that's something you oftentimes have at home. So you don't have to go purchase another product. And using even just like a half a teaspoon and just seeing what happens if I do that prior to a meal. Does that seem to help? Does it seem to hinder anything? We could also use things like zinc carnosine to really help to improve the integrity of the esophagus, and the upper GI tract can absolutely be, beneficial. During the soda test, you said result causes burning after you eat, feel tired. So if you had burning after you eat, that honestly could be high acid or it could be low acid. That would harshly depend on where. If you had burning up in your esophagus, more likely could be higher acid, but not always. But if you had burning more in your stomach, that indicates maybe it's more of a low stomach acid challenge. One question came in, will there be any individualization during the 4-week class? It's not going to be a one-on-one. We can certainly set up one-on-one consults, but I certainly will try to be able to tailor our discussions and my Q&A to be able to answer as much as I possibly can for each individual. But I'm not going to necessarily have labs, full comprehensive stool analysis for every single person, although we certainly could definitely look at that as a side. Does rice vinegar have the same benefits as apple cider vinegar? Taste-wise, I think they both can be utilized in different types of recipes. For this purpose of really seeing from the acid piece, I think apple cider vinegar is known to be a little more acidic, yet tolerable on the gut. So I probably would, for this situation, I would use apple cider vinegar. Somebody asked in terms of why is kimchi a better probiotic? Just not meaning that it's better, just meaning that it is more potent. So in a half a cup of kimchi, you're going to get, don't quote me, I have the information, but you're going to get a good 4 times more than you would get, for example, in a half a cup of a lot of other types of probiotics, if not more than 4 times. So it's just a more potent probiotic. Do bitters increase stomach acid or have direct digestive effect themselves? I think it's more so that, I mean, with all of these bitters, the apple cider vinegar, the betaine, it's, you know, adding acid to the stomach to have that direct digestive effect. With time, I do think that the idea is that you would, with time, be able, that your system would start to produce its own stomach acid more endogenously. So it's not so much you're going to take bitters that's going to make your stomach acid increase endogenously, but more so that what you have in it would be more acidic. And my hope would be that with time, if somebody was using, for example, betaine or bitters or apple cider vinegar before every meal, then maybe we'd be able to do every, you know, it was just 2 meals. And then maybe with time they get down to just doing it before 1 meal a day. And then maybe it's just certain meals. So hopefully with time, you could actually work to, rebuild your stomach acid and improve your endogenous production of acid and not be reliant on these other outside, factors. Let's see. How's our time doing? I'll take a few more here. Prebiotic, probiotic, vitamin that's best. It's just so hard. It really, really depends on for which particular factors are we looking at. That really just could be, all over the map. We'll say that if I had to pick one probiotic in the last 20 years that's had the most significant effect on patients' lives, I have no connection with this company. I get paid nothing from this company, not even 1 penny, although maybe I should. I would say that the greatest effect I've had is from Natren, N-A-T-R-E-N, and their product known as Trenev Trio or Healthy Trinity. They've got, that's just from one all in all. But again, it may be that we really kind of vary that based on so many different, factors. Depending on kind of what the purpose, would be of why we're using those. What supplements, vitamins, Centrum, that includes all the required minerals and vitamins. I'm going to really want to be, careful with which supplements that you all are using. I like to use really high quality supplements that are going to be medical grade, or at least along that line. And so, I think ultimately right now, pure encapsulations, has a few options. Designs for Health, has a couple that I think are that are good. And honestly, I really base it on your biochemistry. Some people are going to need the 5,000 IU D3 and the Pure Response Multi from Pure Encapsulation. Somebody else can't have that amount, and so we may want to go with the Designs for Health Twice Daily Multi. Or somebody else may need to have the Adenosyl Hydroxy B12 because they have a COMT variant. Somebody else may not need that. So really it can be quite personalized, really based on the individual, where their labs are, what their genomics are, and so forth. Let's see, I know there are a lot. I can't get to everything within our hour. Let's just see, question in terms of gluten-free flours. A lot of things use tapioca, white rice flour, good combination that doesn't use high glycemic flours. Honestly, my favorite tends to be nut flours, like almond flour, because you just get such a concentration of nutrients, because I agree that a lot of the gluten-free products are gonna have rice, tapioca, potato starch. Not that you could never have those, but certainly would not be something that I would really encourage to have, more of. Could I talk a bit more about MRT and LEAP? So MRT is a blood test, mediator release test. It's from a company in Florida, Oxford Pharmaceutical Labs, Oxford Labs, I think it is. And essentially it measures 170 different foods and food chemicals. And it will quantify those. And so based on the quantification that each individual would have, and every one of us would have a unique, breakdown, then we remove the, higher reactive foods. In an ideal scenario, you only eat the least reactive foods initially, and then you gradually increase a new food, and a new food, and kind of continue to build on. And by doing that, that then allows those inflammatory mediators like histamines and interleukins to be able to calm down. So we remove that. And so we oftentimes will also want to compare that with doing symptom surveys, for example, on a weekly basis to see and make sure that we're seeing improvement in symptoms. And if we don't, we definitely want to jump in and determine that. So certainly anyone who's interested, I can, with any of these factors, lots of different, kinds of tests, undoubtedly happy to help any of you one-on-one. If you want to do the course, we can certainly look at those, different factors. With MRT, I think I'm allowed to say that in here. I know they've not been able to publicize it, but they are doing a deal right now where it's $199. It's typically $335 is the lowest cost that I'm normally ever able to get it. I've never seen it be $199 in the over 12 or so years that I've been using MRT. And that is supposedly valid until May 15th. It's possible you have a PPO, you've met your out-of-network deductible, you're going to get reimbursed. If you're Medicare or you had an HMO, then you probably are looking at paying out of pocket, on something like that. So our 1 hour time has elapsed. Just out of the sake of your time, the sake of my family who I've kicked out of our kitchen and living room for the hour, I'm going to conclude our session. But again, thank you all for joining. I will definitely look through these questions and, we'll try to be able to do what I can to respond to some of those. But please stay safe. Be healthy out there, and certainly hope to see all of you in the near future, maybe in person, and definitely hopefully have those join me next week. So thank you all. Take care. Have a fabulous rest of your day. Enjoy our beautiful weather.